Bonjour, welcome to this Native Connections National Learning Community session. We're going to give folks a minute to join us before we get started with today's awesome presentation and share.
Okay, while we're waiting on a few people to join, I'll go over some housekeeping rules. Welcome again. Most of the time, the phone lines will be muted, or your mic will be muted, and we'll have a chance for questions and answers toward the end. But please don't hesitate the chat box. We'll have some of our staff monitoring the chat box to answer any questions you may have. And I'll turn this back over to Verna. Thank you, Verna.
Thank you. And this Native Connections National Learning Community session is on the topic of postvention. And so we will get started, Bobby. Turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you. And welcome, everybody. As you know, whenever we gather, we always like to open our gatherings in a good way. So we're very honored today to have one of our grantee representatives, Rhonda Medicine Crow from the MHA, who has kindly and graciously volunteered to open us up in a good way with prayer. So I'd like to pass it to Rhonda.
Dosha, good morning, everybody. Yes, I was asked to open us up in prayer. And, first of all, I apologize to any of our elders, for speaking or for praying, when I know it's usually an elder's duty. But I thank you guys for giving me this opportunity, because when we're asked to directly to pray, we should always say yes. We should always be prepared with a good word and or a song or just, just opening in a good way so that we can all collaborate and get together and build our minds and the work that we do in Native Connections in a good way. So, I just appreciate, being afforded this opportunity, and thank you guys. So, Lord, we just thank you for this day and this time that we gather nationally for Native Connections in a spirit of our learning community to learn from one another and put our brains together so that we'd be a well-working oiled machine, fighting this good fight side by side against suicide and substance abuse with all our families on every nation, every tribe, every community, and every family, and every clan, every society, and so forth. We just thank you for the knowledge that you've given the technical assistance providers and our GPOs and the government. We pray for all our leaders and for all our families that we work with on a daily basis. We thank you for the birds in the air, the four-leggeds, Mother Earth, the environment. We thank you for this winter season that's coming about, and we remember all those who may be affected by that seasonal depression. We just provide a way for our families to maintain healing and be able to do things in a good way, and that we would remember that for some of us, it's a time of storytelling and sharing of our culture and the traditions and the stories that we have out there, and that our young kids, they would be open-minded to learning about who we are, who they are, so that they would build their self-esteem to what we call today, our protective factors, and that they would know exactly who they are. So we thank you for everything that you're doing, and we just pray for good ideas and open hearts, open minds, open ears, so that we can learn from everything that everybody's put so much time into doing and presenting. So we thank you for that all today, Lord. We just are very grateful to be here in one accord. So we just thank you, and we just continue that you use us, ask that you use us in a good way for your glory. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Thank you, Rhonda. Beautiful. As always, beautiful. So we are going to move into introductions. And so I would like to take the moment to introduce myself and welcome everybody to the National Learning Community. My name is Bobby Arthur. Ashihian Shlotkat Nesani Bushishchi, Tko Heglini Dishiche, Kis Anishistine Additionala. So I am Salt Clan and I am born for the Tangle people. My maternal grandfathers are the Water Flows Together, and my paternal grandfathers are the Hopi tribe, the Bear Clan. And again, my name is Bobby Arthur and I am Navajo. And I originate from the New Mexico side of the Navajo Nation, but I'm coming to you today from sunny Phoenix, Arizona area. So I'm really glad to be here with everybody. And I'd like to pass this over to Verna.
Miigwech Bobby and Miigwech Rhonda for the beautiful opening prayer and blessing upon us all in this good work and challenging work that we encounter. And so I wanted to say thank you both. Thank you for this opportunity to come together and discuss some of those areas that we are all collaborating to work towards. So Buju Ani and Verna Mickelson, Indigenous Cause, Gawaba Bigana Kagan Pinjaba. I'm Verna Mickelson. I'm a member of the White Earth Band of Ojibwe, located in northwestern Minnesota. I reside nearby at the Bemidji area, and I'm happy to be here with you all in this effort and this work. And so we will get continuing on right on to our objectives today. And so we again welcome Buju to the participants on the call. I saw several of you as you were joining, and I don't have that view now, so feel free to share in the chat where you're joining us from this morning, this afternoon, and wherever you are across Indian country and our urban organizations. And so our objectives today, we want to gain knowledge on postvention, which we will achieve. We will learn the importance of postvention. You are all aware of that, and we learn from you, and so we hope you're ready to share as well. Understand the importance of safe messaging and the security there, gain knowledge of community involvement in postvention. And so we look to you, the experts in the field. Bobby, I think we have some interaction coming up.
Yes, we do. We'd like to put out there, asking the question, when you think of postvention, what does it mean to you? What comes to your mind when you hear the word postvention? And if you wouldn't mind, you either put it in the chat, or if you're brave, come off mute and share. What does it mean when you hear postvention? We'll take a couple of seconds to wait for some interaction here. So when you hear postvention, what does it mean to you?
I don't know how to word it properly,
Okay.
but it's like maintaining. So, it's somebody who's already gone through a program, already received treatment, but even though you've received the treatment, you need to maintain it. And so it's a way, I think of postvention as maintaining that healing that you received, and pursuing forward, such as like people who are, alcohol and such. It's, maintaining that with those things that you've learned and keep on instilling those thoughts in you and giving you that positive reinforcement to continue on and not pick up that bottle again.
Okay. One form of postvention, it is right. When we're looking at addiction, that is one form of postvention, is that maintenance portion.
My understanding of postvention is offering support after a suicide, and then helping the first responders from the scene of the suicide.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, postvention. Today we're going to be talking about postvention in regards to suicide, and it is the what happens after a suicide happens. I'm noticing that there's a lot of comments in the chat. Val, are you able to give us some of the readings from the,
Yes, I was just going to alert you that we have some ideas shared in the chat. Rhonda Medicine Crow shared that a Postvention is a community plan for what happens after an event like suicide. Leslie Steve added, what happens? It's what happens after suicide. John Bird added, Postvention is what happens after a suicide happens in a community. And Amy Edstrom, providing resources and help to those who have experienced a traumatic event themselves or through other friends or family members. Steve Hedrick added, Postvention for me is recovery after an attempt, reducing the addiction. Postvention shared by Amanda Hardesty means an action plan and response to suicide in communities. Julianne Denny added, Postvention means applying ways that families are comfortable with handling their relative, such as funeral arrangements, support, grieving, groceries, etc. And then Terrence Lefram Boys added, it's anything done after a suicide completion or attempt. I think that's all great responses, everyone.
wow, thank you. Yes, awesome responses. Awesome responses. So yes, we're going to be talking about what Postvention is and how, what it means in regards to suicide. So thank you for all of those. Those are right on. So it's good to know that that everybody here has that good understanding of what Postvention is. Next slide, Mark.
Yes, wonderful responses, feedback and input, Miigwech for that. And the purpose of Postvention, as you've all shared and so eloquently stated and know, helping lost survivors as well as the community to support that healing and grief, taking the initiatives there so that recognizing the devastation that occurs and how those increased thoughts of suicide, can increase attempts with others who may be vulnerable, whether they're closely connected to that loss or indirectly connected. And so Postvention helps reduce more losses to suicide. And we refer to that as contagion. And so that exposure to suicide influencing those likely elevated to risk. And we want to help minimize that and express that in words, right? Because words can be helped and we want to take action on that. So effective Postvention can prevent additional suicides from occurring. And on the next slide, we have certain words that are maybe more a comment here about the language used. So certain words that may be harmful when we do talk about suicide and helping individuals express that our response is effective. And so how can we best support them by minimizing stigmatized phrases that may unknowingly be used? And so we'll look at some of those here up next. To help honor those around us and keeping them safe when we do talk about suicide and learning, keeping it a learning experience for all involved. Next slide.
So as we talk about safe messaging, it's real important to make sure that we have the language that the language around the suicide is direct, and it involves the ability to have that, to make sure that we're passing along the knowledge and understanding. And as we talk about suicide, this concept or the process, suicide in general, is always going to be evolving. So it's going to be something that we're always going to be learning. There's always going to be something new we're learning about. When we talk about the words that we're using in the past, historically, we would kind of refer to the words, someone who had died by suicide, we would say committed suicide. This kind of wording impacts an act that is criminal. You know, when we talk about someone who committed a crime, so it takes away from the intent of behind it, and it turns it into something negative. The preferred words and the preferred messaging for that would be to say someone died by suicide. And it takes away that connection to the crime or to the sin or to commit the sin type of thoughts. The other one is failed suicide. We don't want to say failed suicide because that kind of implies that it wasn't accomplished, that it wasn't an accomplishment. So we want to stay away from that. The preferred language for that is it was a suicide attempt. The other one is successful suicide. Again, refers to an accomplishment. We don't want to refer and to describe someone who had died by suicide as such, because it can lead to further stigma, and it also can be very harming when we're talking about contagion, other suicides. The best thing to say if someone dies by suicide is they took their own life, they died by suicide. Those are more direct, and it avoids some of that stigma that's attached to the other phrase. Also, when we're talking about people who are maybe in regards to suicide, when we're talking about people who are suffering from mental illness and like depression, when we put the condition before the person, it reduces someone's identity to their diagnosis. And so it's good to refer to that, and as far as how we speak about that is to say things like they were living with depression or they were experiencing a mental health condition. They don't become that diagnosis, they then it becomes a part of them. So knowledge and understanding of suicide is, like I had mentioned earlier, is going to always be evolving. There's always going to be new things that we need to be mindful of. And so when we catch ourselves talking, using language as the ones we mentioned here, the ones to avoid, it's good if you can stop to catch yourself, correct yourself, because then it can turn the whole situation into a conversation that is for something for positive learning. And it can be a positive learning experience for everyone that's involved. So it's really good to try to, when we're talking about suicide and how we bring that information and how we talk about it, it's really good to be mindful of our messaging and our language. The next slide. Postvention in the community. When we think about someone who has died by suicide, we often kind of feel like that person, it's usually that family's issue, or it's that family's problem, or we kind of in our mind think that's their problem and not ours. But what Postvention does is it helps you to open that up to help you to understand that when a suicide happens, it's the whole community that gets affected by the loss. We're finding that it's almost like a ripple effect. And it might not be a parent that is very might noticeable at first, but it's like dropping a pebble into a little puddle of water. When you drop that puddle or the water or the rock into the puddle, ripples then begin to kind of ring out to the sides. Well, that's kind of what happens when a suicide happens in a community. Every part of the community then gets affected by the suicide, regardless of whether or not you know the person or not. Somehow, some way, the community is affected. So we're going to talk a little bit about what happens in the community. So Postvention, involves all aspects of the community. It includes and is not limited to what we're going to be sharing here, as far as hospitals, emergency personnel, community, mental health and behavioral health workers, local and state, local, even tribal state agencies, community health workers, spiritual leaders and traditional practitioners can also be affected by this. School leaders, parent groups, community advisory committees, law enforcement, even crisis hotline personnel can be affected. All of these things really become involved in when a suicide happens in a community. And Postvention kind of brings all of those things together. I'll pass it to Vernon.
Thank you, Bobby. Yes, and speaking of those community supports, we look at those additional supports and helpers, our natural helpers, if you will, across the community, who they are our go-tos. We go to them, in good times and challenging times. And so continuing to rely on that support and knowledge, and that can be through a number of ways as listed here on the slide, looking to our elders for that knowledge and support. What is their perception? What do they perceive being priority, and how do we do that? Just really delving into those respected community members who are our knowledge keepers and protect the community going forward. Those traditional spiritual interventions towards community healing, we see so much of this now as grantee technical assistants, our tribal TPA support team, working with the communities. We see the efforts you're taking in towards wellness and healing, and it's a beautiful effort and measure. And this Postvention, I believe, has helped evolve into that. We didn't know of this term, in the years back. And so it was a natural way we stepped forward. We're there to support, we're there to comfort, listen, and provide safety. And so it has really evolved. And there are many additional supports, as Bobby mentioned, the organizations or the agencies established in place to respond, complementing those individuals, being there for those individuals, as one of you have already shared today, supporting those first responders. And so who are those natural helpers and how to get involved? So connecting with those other community support stakeholders identified here, training community health workers and others across programming and on the ground, boots on the ground level, right? Those community members who maybe aren't formally employees or recognized in a certain department, yet we know that they're there, they're responding, they're on the social media calling all those natural helpers to join in prayer and come together in circle in this time of need. So really bringing that to the forefront and participating as one and bringing that forward. And again, that final bullet listed on this slide, that practice of self-care is ever important, as you all know, to continue this work, especially during these challenging times when we're faced and confronted with a response that we've tried to prevent. And how can we get through that and get back to the prevention mode? And part of that, an important, huge component of that is that self-care, practicing that self-care and sharing that with others. Here's what I'm doing to tend to myself. Here's what I'm doing to help my friend over here, my partner at work. What does that look like? And sharing some of those efforts so that others can be more familiar with that practice of self-care and how to continue to progress through and provide that postvention as a community. And so with that, we would like to invite our fellow GTA, our fellow grantee technical assistant, Mr. John Bird is here joining us today and would like to introduce a grantee community he works closely with, the Blackfeet Tribe. I'm stumbling on my words today, Bobby. Our Blackfeet Tribe 75 Native Connections Community in Butch. Thank you for being here. And Mr. John Bird, I'm going to turn it over to you for an introduction.
Okay, thank you, Verna. As Verna said, my name is John Bird. I am a member of the Blackfeet Tribe, and I reside in 2 states. I reside in my home state of Montana. I have a home there, and I go there in the summer. But when it gets cold up there, I move to my home in Arizona, in Tucson, and that's where I am today. So I'm going to formally change my middle name to Snow legally. You can call me Snowbird if you like. So I have the privilege of being a grantee technical assistant for Native Connections, and I have 9 communities that I work with. I also work on another project under the TTA Center that's called the Intensive Training and Technical Assistant. And I'm currently working with one community on that project, the Many Farms chapter of the Navajo Nation. But I have 9 communities under Native Connections, and one of them is the Blackfeet Tribe 75 grantee. And so when Verna and Bobby were developing this national learning community, the agenda and everything, they asked me if I would contact the director of the Blackfeet Tribe program. It's called Culture and Hope, and her name's Amber Williamson, and she's going to take over here and introduce herself in just a bit. And so I did. I got a hold of Amber on her day off. I was up there on the reservation during Thanksgiving, and so I tracked her down and caught her, and she agreed to talk about their experience with Postvention at the Blackfeet Tribe. And so I think there's a lot of really good stuff that we can take away. You know, we're all struggling to find out how to do this in ways that work, and the best ways, you know, the best practices and things. And so I think it's really valuable that we have grantees that, even though, you know, it may have been really difficult, and it may have been, it didn't make suicide go away on the reservation, that we moved the needle and we didn't give up, and that we kept coming back. In Blackfoot, we have a saying, we tell each other all the time, "I'ikakimat," don't give up. You know, you just have to keep trying, try your best. You know, that's the way that the elders always encourage us and encourage me growing up. And I encourage Amber and Terrence in that way. So, you know, they're going to talk about what they did. They did their best, you know, to respond to some really difficult things that were going on there on the Blackfeet Tribe. So I'm going to turn it over to Amber and let them get started with, they're going to have about 30 minutes for their presentation, and there's going to be a question and answer period afterwards. We would ask you to hold your questions until the end, please. Thank you. Amber, take it away.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Native Connections National World. Okay, Amber Williamson, I'm Skapi Pikani. As John stated, I am the Director of Culture and Hope. Moving into this conversation, I would like to give a little bit of a background. But before we move into that, I'd like Terrence LaFramboise to go ahead and introduce himself as well.
Okay, can you guys hear me? Can you hear me, Amber?
Yes.
Yes, we hear you.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I just didn't want to start talking and not be heard. Okay, Nixo Quex, Nistu, Nidunidanikus, Pumokit Nan, Isituku Mapa Pumas, okay, I'm Skapi Pikani Sitigate Sitibi, Pikani Mr. Keeks Consulting, the state of Montana, DPHHS Zero Suicides, and getting to work with Amber Williamson. Thankful to be on the call. I wear many hats in community and with certain departments, and just thankful to be a part of this call to provide insight, understanding from our community.
So really quick, we'll give you a background. The community in which we worked is actually 30 miles away from our main location, which is Browning. It is a smaller community, but still Pikani, still our people. They are very rural and have limited services. They do have an IHS clinic, and a lot of people do travel to work, but they last spring were hit with some pretty heavy experiences. They had a domestic violence fatality, and following that domestic violence fatality, they had a suicide. And not too long after that, they experienced an overdose and another suicide, and within a week or two, another suicide. So after the first death by suicide, we as prevention programs began to reach out to our neighboring community and asking to see what kind of support they needed. We brought them resources. We have crisis folders, we have postvention folders, and asked the principal, you know, how can we help support you? And we were told that they need more in-person support. And so as we were moving through reaching out to other programs, trying to collaborate here within our Browning community, we were also receiving a lot of support from statewide supports. And they were just coming in at different places to different people. There wasn't really a point of contact. There wasn't any kind of plan in place to follow through. It was just the siloed programs doing what they could do to help. And so after a couple weeks of trying to find out if there was a plan in place, is there any programs that have things in place? We would like to help support and help with the planning piece of it. Both from our level here within the tribal systems and Terrence as well from the state side. We had seen a plan or two, we had heard of a plan or two, but there really wasn't anything in place. And so after the initial one, we were reaching out, we were struggling to bring everybody together. By the second one, it got more, it was more pressing. Like, we need to be on top of this. We need to be able to move through this right now. And by the third, the community itself had a couple community members say this is enough. And so what they did is they had a community-wide suicide awareness walk. And so they did the walk. And from at that point, the person that had organized the walk, there was about 5 of them. They had personally reached out to us and to Terrence and to multiple organizations. They were worried about their community. They were struggling, they needed help. And so after they did the community walk, Terrence and I jumped into action, and we worked with the community members, which we now refer to the aunties and the uncles. And we were able to provide them a space where we were able to meet on a weekly, bi-weekly basis with the most high risk in the community. And so the aunts and the uncles, when we would set the dates to provide this space, would go into the community and they would gather all these young men, and they would bring them to the space, and we would provide a meal and we would provide conversation. It was limited. We always invited the aunts and the uncles to be part of the conversation, but we made that space for them. We just gave them a safe space to come and visit and have real conversations. Terrence and I both have personal experience personal experiences. And so we were able to just provide that space for an hour and a half to an hour bi-weekly for these young men to come in and have some real conversations and visit about some of our traditional ways. So a lot of the work we did was a blend between the Western and traditional knowledge. And with that being said, I'll let Terrence go from here.
Thank you, Amber. Yeah, I think being asked to present on Postvention and the work that we did in community, we were looking at it in two different kind of perspectives, two different areas of thinking. Was one is, we didn't do enough and we needed to do more. On top of that was, we're not doing it correctly, and no one's given us, any sort of roadmap or pathway to go off of. So kind of going back to the beginning, Terrence Laframboise, is a Zero Suicide Grant Coordinator for the state of Montana under DPHHS, Public Health and Human Services. Prior to that, I was at the Blackfeet Tribal Health under Methamphetamine Suicide Prevention Initiative. So being in community, understanding community's needs and wants, while also working under tribal health, and now at the state level, working with multiple reservations, but still living in community. I work remotely, so it's a blessing, but then also being called upon for a lot of community resource. So I remember I was out of town when the first one had happened, and it was kind of the galvanizing of those siloed areas, these specific people that we can pinpoint to say, well, they can come, they could be here. We did those foundational works. And a lot of that is based off of me and Amber and the select few of us that are really trying to create a pathway for community. And that was my job at the state level. Is Zero Suicide is an organizational platform that helps promote organizational pathways for communities and clients. And it was kind of just passing the buck, oh, well, so-and-so should be there. They're going to come out, getting in touch with people and kind of getting this word of mouth, like, oh, we'll be there, don't worry. And then another suicide happened. And it was kind of like, what's going on? Why aren't we doing anything to stop what's going on? And who are the supports? Who's out there? What's happening? And coming to find out, there was little to no things being pushed into our smaller communities. And I think we all come from spaces where we have multiple communities where we're from. And I reached out to the services on my end, kind of in between that first week and week 2, from first suicide to second suicide at the state level, to let people kind of like a breakdown process, like points of contact. The state was contacted by a county, and counties and reservations have kind of this long-term disconnection sometimes. So working with the state and county, we were called in to support the tribe. And this is where I was able to kind of step in, not only as myself as a community rep and a consultant, but as a state rep to provide state resources. And that varies from tribe to tribe, because not all tribes want state resources. A lot of tribes are sovereign, and we honor those spaces. So working with Amber and Culture and Hope, the third suicide happened. And it was kind of like what Amber had mentioned, that kind of coming to a head, recognizing that something needed to happen. And we were thankful for some of the community members to kind of take action. So it took a multitude of spaces to kind of get to where we were at. And that was a community-wide acknowledgement of said suicides. And there was multiple programs that were able to participate, but a lot of that kind of feels like what we know in our smaller communities is we pander these issues. We sometimes acknowledge them in real time in crisis, but as it goes on, they tend to kind of fall back to those back burners, that subconscious. So it was our effort that we didn't want that to happen. We needed to create action, and we were trying to connect systems of cares to these areas that needed support. And what recognizing is some of our systems of cares have those spaces that are unhealthy, lack resources, and then also the policy and procedures negate them to support specific areas. So it's like our hands were tied behind our back, and it was like, you know, we need to do our phony baloney jobs. And I think Amber put it on the head, is we both have lived and learned experience with suicide. And that plays into a little bit of this, you know, we're not going to take no for an answer. And we're going to try our best to get what we want for said community. So we wanted to really get with the high risk students. And that wasn't working with the school system because the high risk students weren't in school. They were in community. And that was one of the biggest disconnections that we recognized, was a system was already pushing or prioritizing said youth and students. And the community itself, like Amber mentioned, is ravaged with those symptoms that we see in our communities: domestic violence, unhealthy relationships, drugs and alcohol, systemic issues that, you know, we can only combat so much. So what we and Amber had mentioned is we need to just do a group to provide a safe space for our youth to be able to tell us, well, what is it that is needed? Because we all think we know, but we need to hear it from them. So in those weeks that we got with the kids, it was really uplifting to see day one, to recognize, you know, the last meeting. And then that 2.5 months time span, we really put in the effort of creating cultural awareness, tools and education, safety, story, and at the same time feeding them, acknowledging them, giving them gifts, praising them, and acknowledging the reality that they're living in, that it isn't healthy, it isn't the best, and to be in that space and to hear it. I think that was the best thing we'd given those youth. And I think to kind of push little past what Amber was saying, because I think there was a lot of breakdowns in specific areas, but I know we tried our best to galvanize troops to kind of hone together support systems and bridges being made, or just building the foundational supports that were already there. And that one group, and we just called it the boys group, men's group, was we attuned it to cultural ceremony. Pikani Bata Bisini, our way of life was what we wanted to ground these young men in. And for the most part, we did what we could during that time. And it was kind of to our best efforts that we needed to kind of push them to long-term supports and care. And this is where I think me and Amber might have a different view, but this is where I think, you know, we in Postvention need to continually make sure that we're going back to these areas. Because when we get to safe spaces, sometimes we feel comfortable and we allow things to kind of go on without that safety supports and all that. And that goes back to, you know, our personal experiences, our lives, our jobs, our self-care, our supports ourselves as workers and frontline workers. So we recommended that these youth have long-term supports, that they get back into school, that we had all these recommendations based off of our experience, our knowledge and expertise. And we did. I think that whole summer, I would see every now and then these kids, and they would always remind me, hey, checking in, doing good. And one case was, one kid came in the first day, we were doing medicine pouches, and we were allowing them to pick up medicines and to be able to put them in a pouch and to hold them so they have them when they're triggered, when they're hurting, when they need that sense of balance. And one of the kids was like, nah, F that. This is pissy. I don't need that. So I ain't here for this. And he kind of was just really tuned out. And he was the one that was super high risk, attempting drugs and alcohol in his life, alcoholic dad. And by the end of this group, dad sober, the young man was no longer attempting, and he was then helping others stop attempting. And these are the highlights, because I think we see these highlights and we're like, oh yeah, that's a given. We provided love and safety. Of course they're going to show that. I think where I kind of hang my hat on is the people we kind of let fall to the wayside. So beginning of this year, And this is the hard and harrowing part of postvention. No matter how much we put effort into, and no matter how systemically we change things and we provide safety, we're always going to have suicide. And what I mean by that, I don't mean it to mean so like, because this is my job, this is what we do. But the idea is we're not doing the whole spectrum, and we're only doing parts. And we could create these safeties, but like one thing that got us is we did these for this group of young men, but yet one of the men from the group that we were working with suicided at the beginning of this school year. So all summer, and then he suicides back into school. And it just kind of, it drains you. It drains you. It puts things in perspective that, what are we doing, and how are we doing it in a way that is working and connectable? How are we servicing and using these grants to the best of their ability? And I just want to give kudos to Amber and her team. They've done so much with little to no support, and being able to work with Amber on a community level, I think is very empowering, because there's a lot of times we hit these walls, and people like Amber, make those walls disappear. So I think that's what it takes when we're looking at postvention in our communities, is recognizing that we will have someone fall through those cracks. As much as we want to tighten them up, as hard as we are trying, those will happen. So you got to be able to take care of yourself. And that's one thing that I know me and Amber pride ourselves on, is we lean into culture. We lean into those spaces that are hard. We lean into those support systems that, we've had to create, or we're there and we just built them stronger. And that's what it takes when we're looking at postvention is, and this was kind of the big thing for me was, well, what is it? And a lot of it is, well, it's anything done after a suicide is completed or attempted. What are we doing, positive or negative? How are we making that impact to create long-term safety? Sorry about that. I get a little emotional. Amber, do you have anything to add to that?
Just that, at the end of the day, we have to be able to depend on each other and our communities. We never know who the community champions or warriors are going to be. They usually rise up out of traumas. But if we continue to try to work together and work with programs in our communities and beyond, and just keeping kindness as a model to move forward in the work we do, because a lot of times we're really pushed to our limits. And so you have to have some kind of support in place to continue to do the work we all do on this call right now. And so I think one of the biggest takebacks of this is find who your group is, find who your support system is. And you should be able to find them as you move through your work. They may be within your program, they may be community members. You may have a really good group that just rises to the occasion. You never know, but we always have to be open-minded, and we always have to be willing to work with each other, because we honestly it takes a village to raise a kid. Even though we weren't directly in that village, we came together as that village to help take care of those kids. And by doing so, we help the community rise up. We help them to know that, hey, we're here to help support you guys too. You let us know what you need. And it's never just one person doing one thing or one program doing one thing. It's literally anybody that has that champions, that warrior mentality that says, okay, enough's enough. Things need to change. Again, we are as strong as our support teams are.
I don't have anything more, Vern. I don't have any.
I want to acknowledge both Amber and Terrence for sharing and acknowledging the fact that this hit all of us close to home. And I would like to take a moment just for us to reiterate that importance of taking care of those, that caring for the carers, right? Caring for the providers and taking time to really consider and acknowledge how it impacts us. We carry that forward in our work when we're directly impacted with losses, as we all are, and part of how we got involved and stay involved with this work. And with that, just a moment I would like us to take, and John, if you are ready and available to just help us acknowledge and appreciate the gratitude for the work shared from the Blackfeet tribe here today across the Native Connections grantees in this community together and supporting. Oftentimes we don't have that support as the people responding, and so we want to take a moment to recognize that and say thank you, Chimigwich, for our presenters acknowledging these efforts. The postvention work, we know that is essential and can be exhausting, and so we've asked John to offer us this moment. John.
Thank you, Verna. I just want to say that, the thinking about the things that Amber and Terrence talked about and listening to their words, it hits us hard. How many of you, just raise your hand, or if you can say something in the chat box or whatever, but how many of you feel the impact of the words they spoke, the struggle, the pain, but also the accomplishment that they managed to, and the successes that they managed to accomplish in, within all of that other stuff that was going on. That takes some real strength. And like, I really, this particular community, it's the community I'm from, these are my people. They're my relatives. Terrence is my close relative. I'm very proud of him. He graduated with his degree in social work, and he went to the University of Toronto and learned from Jane Middleton Moss about working with trauma, and got a master's in social work, and I kind of directed him to that program because I'm a friend of Jane Middleton Moss. And so I'm really proud of Terrence, and I'm proud of Amber, but I know the difficulty also of working in a community where, we don't always get or have the support that we need to sustain a long-term effort like that. And, some of us are working towards that, trying to highlight that, that's a need, highlight that to tribal leaders, highlight that to community influencers, that, we really need to pressure the service system to do better, to work together better, that, we can do so much more and be so much more effective if we work together and we collaborate. That's always been a shortfall of the Blackfeet community, the service provider system. And I'm going to say that publicly, and I'm going to say, we need better. We expect better. As a Blackfoot tribal member, we deserve better. Our families deserve better. So I just want to say that. It's a lot of hard things, and I'm going to just, sometimes we need to just be able to let something go, or to come to peace with something, or to say, I acknowledge these words, I acknowledge the impact, I acknowledge the difficulty of working around this topic in my community. I acknowledge that, and I see that, I feel that. So I'm just going to sing a song and ask you all to just close your eyes and think about what you want to move forward with in this effort in your community, and think about what are the things you just want to let drift away, the things that aren't helping you in that work. Okay. So I'm just going to sing the song. It's a song I've really become fond of because it helps me when I need help. It soothes me. It creates a gentle space in my head and in my chest, in my spirit. It helps to bring me to a place of balance. And so I hope it'll do the same thing for you. Oh, hey, oh, hey, hi, 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 oh, hey. Oh, hey, 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 ah, hey, ah, hey, hi, oh, hey, oh, hey, hi, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, hi, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh. Oh, Hanya. So I just wanted to do that. Verna asked me to help transition from the presentation from Amber and Terrence into the Q&A part. So I'm going to turn it back over to Verna and Bobby. Thank you.
Good, John, as always.
Thank you, John.
Yes, thank you.
So kind of going back into our NLC, we really try to leave some good information with everybody. And so we do have some resources that are available in regards that where you can get more information on suicide prevention and on postvention. We also put in the chat somewhere at the top of, and somewhere in the chat, there is the postvention fact sheet that was put in the inside of the chat. So, feel free to take the information and from what you heard here, and then the resources that we have listed, and use it to the best of what fits for your communities.
Thank you, Bobby. Yes, and so moving into that Q&A portion, next up, a lot of comments in this chat. I certainly appreciate the engagement, the support and acknowledgement there for one another and efforts shared, as well as what you're doing in your community across Native Connections. A lot of good information shared. One question that came up, Steve. I know Steve was on camera for a while. If you would like to speak, oh, there you are. If you'd like to speak to your question, very good question, based by state, and some feedback in the chat, which I think is prompting a good effort for people to look into what each uniqueness in the states are. Steve, I see you've unmuted.
Yeah. I was just basically asking kind of the legality or the current legality status of suicide, because I know historically suicide has been outlawed places. And I'm just kind of current at what that is now. And then I think now even kind of the next kind of progression is really kind of going away from just like when someone says they have suicidal ideation, oh, we shove them in the hospital, put them on a 72-hour hold, which that's probably not the best approach either. But I think first thing we got to kind of decriminalize it. And then we got to kind of understand that, 72-hour holds for people with suicidal ideation is not always the best. Sometimes it's definitely appropriate, but not always the best kind of thing. And that's something even we had in our policies that we're kind of slowly refining and adapting to kind of go away from that instinctual thing of just like, we don't know how to handle this, we'll just throw them in the hospital, which sometimes can be really counterproductive.
Yes, and that criminalization really established, the thought of the stigmatization, right? That still continues today, and that's the basis of that initial foundation of criminal activity and establishing that community-wide and connecting that to a crime committed. And that's where we talk about that language used, which can be harmful, and go back to those stigmatized labels. And so good question. I see in the chat many responses to your questions, Steve and Terrence. Thank you for responding in the chat. Not necessarily a law that bans or outlaws suicide in Montana, yet there are places that criminalize it. And so instead of a hold, maybe they're jailed, right? And so creating that stigma again. And reservation in Montana that uses the jail. There you go for the suicide attempts and ideations. Not in Michigan, only if one assists, then of course those legalities come into factor and shared. And I believe there was an additional response with another state, but please continue. Arkansas, I know you mentioned looking into that and prompting some good research there that way as well, Steve. So thank you. If I've missed any, my team Val and Bobby will chime in. I know there are potential other questions rolling up, so please feel free to unmute. And if I've missed any in the chat here. Lots of feedback for the presentation, the grantee shares, and acknowledgement there for all the hard work each of you are doing on this, who are joining. So thank you for that feedback. Any other comments, questions, Bobby, that I'm missing? Anyone unmute that would like to chime in?
I don't see any questions, but yeah, there are a lot of good comments in here about the presentations. All really positive, like you said, really positive responses. Marie has shared that during the presentation, it's a beautiful truth. It is hard to break the cycle of trauma. And as we all know in this work, continue to do this work with our best intention is how we can break the cycles and continue to save lives and bring our people into the light of healing. She agrees with you both, and thanks for sharing. Self-care can't be shared enough. Thank you for that comment, Marie.
I see Amber chimed in as well, Bobby, in attribute to the Honor Missoula All Nations program as well that came into the community to help facilitate community-wide QPR training, those gatekeeper trainings. That's postvention that leads back into the prevention and intervention effort. Laura, thank you for sharing. Honored to work with these amazing. Connie. Continuous praise, and I want to touch on Idela's comments here. A collaboration between Native Connections programs. You are all worthy. That is the ultimate goal, not only in community partnering with one another, when we have external partners that we can rely on for support and help. I know how close-knit some of our communities are, even though we're under a different tribal affiliation or Native Connections program or what have you. We're often interwoven and impacted across communities with losses. Yet we're able to support, we're able to come together in a collaborative way to provide that postvention effort as needed and essential. I think that is a huge testament to this Native Connections program on establishing collaborations and partnerships, thinking outside of those silos we hear mentioned, who else is available, who else is knowledgeable, and where else are our natural helpers, natural healers, our warriors that can be by our side, and reaching out to them and having them show up as needed, as well as Idell has mentioned the Blackfeet 75 shares information and resources at 988 information with permission from families during services for those passed on from traumatic deaths and suicide. Yes. And we know how other traumatic deaths impact those with thoughts of suicide, the correlation and connections there. Having those resources available at funerals. I know, working with my tribe, we tried to connect with those funeral directors, those funeral homes and providers to share resources immediately with families. And so during services, thank you, Idella.
Oh,
Yes.
thank you for that idea. That I have to go do that now.
Yes.
About the sharing with the funeral directors and funeral homes. That's a really good idea. Thank you.
Yes, and getting that connection, even I think some of these examples, individuals were on site to refill baskets that were being emptied with, a basket of resources, of flyers, of a card, a 988 resource. Those were, being utilized. And so being on site to refill those baskets, being there, providing those with those funeral directors indeed. Thinking outside the box, how else can we get contact and connect to those needing and desiring that support? And just skimming down, I believe Misty's comments here. We at Culture and Hope also offer postvention folders for families. A folder, yes, thank you. Organization, outreach, and collaboration. Thank you. Any additional comments at this time? We have.
I don't
Yes, go ahead.
see any. I don't see any,
Okay.
Verna. I know Carolyn. I don't know if you read Carolyn's comment. She put in, I feel what they are going through, and it's tough when we don't have enough help or support from the community. But working and helping each other from our elders, we got through and maintain our youth, letting them know they are important and valued. It is really difficult to try to have your community to be involved with when we're talking about, especially when we're talking about suicide. It's hard to get them involved just in general. And I really admire yesterday when we had met with Amber and Terrence. I had mentioned that I really admired grantees when they share their stories and the challenges of how they're up against kind of swimming upstream when everybody else is going downstream, as far as like support and trying to get some stakeholders and some buy-in from community members and our tribal leaders and the leaders of our communities. It can get very tiresome and very grueling and maybe even discouraging, and sometimes feeling a little bit of hopeless. But I really admire the strength and the courage it takes for grantees when they hold on to the best they can to try to really stay the course with what they're doing and their intentions of what they're doing and helping their communities. And so I feel like that was part of some of the story that was shared today by Terrence and Amber. And again, for grantees out there that might be having that struggle, stay the course. It's a really tough space to be in, but if you stay the course, eventually something happens, change happens. There's a lot of hope in your story. But I don't see any other comments.
Thank you so much for the grantee share presentation and all of the input here. I know, again, it impacts us all and hits home, and we're all working through our own level of postvention as well as we continue the work. So Chinigwich to Blackfeet Tribe and everyone here for sharing so far and getting close to wrapping up. Bobby, I believe we have some upcoming events we can share out across Native Connections that grantees may like to see updates on.
Yes, we do have some upcoming webinars. The Native Connections Approach, the series part 1 and 2 are coming up. The first one is going to be an overview of the approach, the Native Connections Approach, which is going to be December 12th. And then we have part 2, getting ready with data collection. And that's going to be bringing in the new year, January 16, 2024. And then we're going to be having a naming ceremony in youth wellness on January 30th. Our next learning community is going to be sharing across Native Connections regions, the biggest program challenges, surprises, and wins. And that's going to be April 1st. That's going to be our next NLC. And our next podcast has to do with food sovereignty, celebrating culture and the holiday season. And that's going to be released on December 20th, 2023. Another podcast is going to be the sustainability, collaborating for longevity. And that's going to be released on February 7th, 2024.
That's coming up.
Yeah, we have a lot of good things coming up.
Lots to look forward to.
And if you, real quick, Verna, and if you still need more information on us, please feel free to look at your weekly digest. All of everything, all our the Native Connections upcoming events are always listed every week. So take a look at your weekly digest.
Bobby, Verna?
Yes.
This is Valerie, GTA from Alaska. I just wanted to add that in February, we'll be adding additional national learning community around PC Cares, which stands for Promoting Community Conversations about Research to End Suicide, and Manilik will be presenting. So I just wanted to share that.
Exciting. Yes.
Awesome.
I see GTAs in the chat shouting out their RLCs coming up. Dr. Marty Richardson has shared the ECSS RLC February 8th, 11 a.m. Central, Miigwech. The Great Lakes Northern Plains Regional Learning Community Session coming up the 4th Thursday of December, the 28th. And I see questions regarding regional site visits where we come together actually in person. And so thank you for that question, Rhonda. The GONA RLCs, Steve, are you referencing the RSCs? So hopefully you all have received just earlier this week, the regional site visit e-blast, save the date went out. If you have not received that, please contact your grantee technical assistant. We will make sure you receive that email. And in-person meets, yes. So regional site visits occur as applicable. And so this year's we have a couple coming up, and the one that I know is scheduled April, that will be the California, Nevada region held in Sacramento is the tentative location. That information again came out in an e-blast. There will be 2 additional regional site visits, one for the Great Lakes Northern Plains to be determined. That will come June, July of 24. And in between those 2, there will be the Southwest, and that is looking at May, I believe the month of May,
Right.
with location to be determined. So we have several coming up, again, California, Nevada, April. The e-blast went out, shares some info about how you can select which you're able to attend, of course, based on your scheduling and funding. We also look forward to you sharing these topics, this information at our gatherings, whether they're virtual or on-site in person. So the regional learning communities that take place virtually, we love to learn together and from the grantees. That is the intent and purpose of the RLCs and NLCs. How are we getting through all these efforts and what that looks like at the grantee level? So thank you so much. start to plan what you want to share out. Good discussion held here that I feel many of you could contribute to. So that would be great to see at some of those regionals. And Marie has chimed in. Yes, and so Marty mentioned reaching out to your GTA to be added to contact list to receive those e-blasts. And Marie has mentioned West Coast RSV, April 9th to 11th. Yes, 2 additional. Yeah, okay. So reiterating what was just shared. And if you have questions, additional questions and topics of discussion you would like to add to the agenda and be on to present, please connect with your GTA and start planning now. That would be wonderful. Great questions. Newsletter. Okay, but I'm not sure if I missed any else.
I have a
Any
question.
additional
Have you
questions,
guys ever
comments?
thought about doing a national like site visit from all the sites to have like a little thing?
That would be wonderful, wouldn't it? Yes, so it really varies depending on the budget and SAMHSA's determination. The GPOs help make those decisions. So that is an idea you could potentially share with your GPO that you'd like the opportunity to connect across Indian country. But you are also welcome to select which region you attend at this time. Good question. All right, and with that, it looks like we have nearly 14 minutes that we can give you back in your day for an opportunity to utilize as some self-care, some much needed self-care, refill your mug, take care of yourself. Yes, coffee, afternoon coffee, tea, a healthy water, a healthy snack, and take care of yourself. So with that, I would love to say Chimigwich and Jikawapanan. We will see you all soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Be safe.
Thank you.